I used to believe that ordinary people didn't belong in extraordinary worlds. That belief lasted right up until the night a black car stopped in front of my apartment building. A sleek, unfamiliar shape against the cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights of my neighborhood. It was raining again. It always seemed to rain when my life was about to change. I stood there under the awning, clutching a grocery bag filled with instant noodles, when a man in a dark suit stepped out of the car. His umbrella unfolded with a mechanical click, and even from a distance, I could tell he didn't belong here. Evan Hale. His voice was calm, professional, but carried the kind of authority that made my chest tighten. I hesitated. Yeah, that's me. He gave a brief nod. Mr. Ashford would like to speak with you. Privately. I blinked, my first instinct screaming scam, but the man handed me a sleek business card embossed with silver letters. Ashford Enterprises. My breath caught. Everyone in the city knew that name. Leon Ashford, billionaire CEO, known for his ruthless precision and icy charm. A man rumored to build empires by day and destroy hearts by night. Why would he want to see me? I stammered. The man didn't answer. The car's warm. You should come. Maybe I should have run back inside, locked my door, and ignored whatever madness this was. But when your rent's overdue, your scholarship's been revoked, and the fridge hums empty at midnight, curiosity starts to sound a lot like hope. So I got in. The ride was silent except for the rhythmic sweep of the wipers. City lights blurred into streaks of gold and blue as we cut through traffic. My heart thudded, so hard I was afraid the driver could hear it. When we finally stopped, I realized we were in front of a building I'd only ever seen in newspapers, Ashford Tower. 50 floors of glass and ambition. Inside, everything gleamed. White marble floors, walls lined with black glass, air scented faintly with cedar and wealth. I followed the assistant through an elevator that seemed to move faster than my pulse. When the doors slid open, a cold draft brushed my skin. The office stretched wide, all clean lines and silence. Behind a massive glass desk stood him. Leon Ashford. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered but composed, like someone who had forgotten how to be ordinary. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit sharp enough to cut. But it was his eyes that trapped me, grey, cold, and infinitely tired, like storm clouds that never cleared. Mr. Hale, he said, his voice low, smooth and detached. Thank you for coming. I swallowed hard. I wasn't given much of a choice. A faint smile flickered at his lips, almost too quick to be real. Fair enough. Please sit. I sat, awkwardly aware of the plush leather chair, probably worth more than my tuition. I'll be direct, Leon said, folding his hands. I need someone to accompany me to several public events over the next month. You'll be compensated generously. I frowned. Accompany you as in? His gaze didn't waver. As my partner. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. You're what? He leaned back. You'll act as my lover. For appearances. My heart stopped. You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend? Yes. His tone was matter-of-fact, like he was asking me to sign for a package. You will be required to attend charity galas, business dinners, and social functions. My image has suffered since. He paused. Something flickered in his expression, grief, sharp and fleeting. Since my fiancé passed away. I froze. I'd heard rumors about that. The tragedy that silenced the city's most powerful man for months. His fiancée, a model, if I remembered right, had died in a car crash. Leon continued quietly. The media won't leave it alone. I need someone who can convince them I've moved on. The resemblance is convenient. I blinked. Resemblance? He finally met my eyes fully, and my stomach twisted. To him, Leon said softly. You look like him. The room went silent. I couldn't find my voice. The way he said it, not as a compliment, but as an accusation, made me want to disappear into the leather chair. I don't understand, I whispered. Why me? You could hire a professional actor. I don't want an actor. Then what do you want? Leon's gaze darkened, unreadable. I want someone who doesn't ask too many questions. That should have been my cue to leave. Instead, I sat there, hearing the sound of my empty wallet screaming in my pocket. He slid a folder across the desk, a contract, crisp and neat. The number written on the last page made my mouth go dry. It was enough to clear my debts, pay for my tuition, and maybe even breathe again. Think of it as a performance, Leon said. All I require is your discretion. You'll stay at my residence during the duration of the contract for convenience. You'll be briefed on my routines, preferences, and public history. I hesitated. What happens if I say no? He shrugged. Then I'll find someone else. The world is full of faces that look like the ones we've lost. Something in me cracked at that sentence, the loneliness in his voice, buried under the arrogance. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled. I'll do it. The moment I signed, something invisible shifted between us. A weight I didn't yet understand. Leon stood, his movements sharp and efficient. You start tomorrow. My driver will pick you up at 9. Dress formally. He turned to leave but stopped halfway, glancing over his shoulder. One more thing, Mr. Hale. Yes. Don't look for meaning where there isn't any. Then he was gone. When I stepped back into the cold night, my reflection stared at me from the glass doors, soaked, pale, uncertain. What had I just agreed to? Was I helping a grieving man heal, or letting myself become a shadow for someone who no longer existed? I pressed a hand to my chest. My heart was racing so fast it hurt. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about bills or deadlines. I was thinking about him, about that look in his eyes when he said, "You look like him." Some part of me wanted to run. Another part wanted to stay, to understand what kind of pain could turn love into a transaction. I didn't know it then, but that signature had just rewritten my life. I thought I was agreeing to a job. But the truth? I was stepping straight into a storm, one that would tear down everything I thought I knew about love, loss, and myself. And when it was over, I would no longer be anyone's substitute. I would be his forever. The next morning, I woke up with a single thought pounding in my head. What have I done? The contract lay on my desk, signed and sealed, its smooth paper mocking me. I kept reading the words over and over, half expecting them to vanish, half hoping they would. But they didn't. It was real. I, Evan Hale, 24, art student and professional nobody, had just agreed to pretend to be the lover of Leon Ashford, a man the world saw as untouchable. At precisely 9 o'clock, a black car arrived at my building again. The same suited assistant stepped out, stone-faced as ever, and gestured for me to get in. I wore the only suit I owned, borrowed from a friend, slightly too big at the shoulders, the color faded from years of careful washing. The car ride felt longer this time, the silence heavier. When we stopped, the gates in front of us opened like something out of another world. Tall iron, trimmed with gold, leading to a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured gardens. It looked more like a castle than a home. My heart pounded as the assistant led me inside. Everything gleamed, marble floors, polished chandeliers, and huge paintings that probably cost more than my entire education. Leon was already waiting in the living room. He stood by the window, phone in hand, his posture straight and cold. When he turned, I froze. He looked different in daylight. Less like a photograph from a magazine, more like a man carved out of grief and precision. His grey eyes flicked over me once, sharp and assessing. "You're early," he said. "Should I not be?" "Punctuality is good," he replied, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Follow me." He led me through the house, explaining things as if giving instructions for a performance. "This room is yours," he said, opening a door to a guest suite that looked like something from a 5-star hotel. "We'll attend 2 public events this week, a business dinner tonight, and a charity gala Saturday. You'll be briefed before each one." I nodded, clutching my small bag like a shield. Leon studied me for a moment. "You're nervous. Wouldn't you be?" I blurted before I could stop myself. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Perhaps." He turned to leave, but I found my voice. "Why me, really? Out of everyone you could have chosen." He paused, his back still to me. "Because when I looked at you, it felt like I'd seen a ghost." I didn't know what to say to that. The room suddenly felt colder. The hours passed in a blur of instructions. Leon's assistant, a woman named Claire, arrived with folders, photographs, and information sheets. I learned what Adrian, the late fiancé, had been like. His favorite foods, his public mannerisms, the way he stood beside Leon for cameras. Each detail felt like a thread tying me tighter to someone else's life. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked quietly as Claire adjusted my tie. "Because the world remembers him," she said. "You need to remind them that Leon has moved on." Moved on. The words stuck in my throat. By evening, I was standing in front of a mirror, wearing a tailored suit Leon had sent up. It fit perfectly, dark navy, smooth fabric that whispered wealth and restraint. But when I looked at my reflection, I barely recognized myself. The man staring back wasn't Evan Hale, broke art student. He was someone else, someone borrowed, someone painted over. When Leon entered the room, I almost dropped the cufflink I was trying to fasten. He looked impeccable, as always, black suit, silk tie, a faint scent of cedar and smoke. He reached for my wrist without asking, fastening the cufflink with practiced ease. His fingers brushed my skin briefly, and I swear my pulse skipped. "Try to look comfortable," he murmured. "They'll be watching." "I'll do my best," I said, forcing a small smile. He studied me, his eyes unreadable. "You look fine. Let's go." The business dinner was at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. Lights glittered below us like stars trapped in glass. The air was rich with perfume and expensive laughter. As soon as we entered, cameras flashed. People turned, curious, whispering. Leon's hand rested lightly at my back, guiding me forward. He didn't falter, not once. Every movement was perfectly calculated. He leaned in to whisper something about the menu, his voice low enough that only I could hear. And for the crowd, it looked intimate. Real. My heart was a mess of nerves, but his calmness steadied me. Until someone approached the table. Leon Ashford. A woman greeted, her red lips curling into a practiced smile. "It's been too long." "And who's this?" Leon's arm slipped easily around my waist. "This is Evan," he said smoothly. "My partner." The woman's eyes widened slightly, just for a second, before she recovered her poise. "So soon?" "After." She trailed off delicately. Leon's voice turned glacial. "After what, Mrs. Collins?" Her smile faltered. "Nothing, dear. Just surprised, that's all." I felt his hand tighten slightly against my waist, subtle but sharp. I leaned in, pretending to whisper something to him, trying to ease the tension. For a second, our faces were close enough for me to see the faint stubble on his jaw, the line of his throat. He smelled of rain and quiet danger. He looked down at me, and just like that, the performance turned too real. When the dinner finally ended, I could barely breathe. Every word, every smile, every carefully timed glance had been part of the act. But somewhere between the laughter and the lies, I caught glimpses of something else in Leon's eyes. A flicker of sadness, a softness he tried to hide. In the car ride home, silence filled the space between us. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke. "You did well." I blinked. "Thanks. I guess. You're quick to adapt. It's useful." That should have been reassuring. But instead, it made me feel small, like a tool that performed correctly. "I wasn't sure if I'd mess it up," I admitted. "You almost did." My head snapped up. "What?" He glanced at me, expression unreadable. "When she mentioned him, you froze." "I didn't." "Yes, you did. Don't let anyone see that again." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. "I'm not him, Leon," I said quietly. The car slowed at a red light. For a moment, he looked at me, really looked, and something flickered behind those grey eyes. "I know," he said finally. "That's what makes this harder." Before I could ask what he meant, the car started moving again. Back at the mansion, I changed out of the suit and wandered the halls, trying to shake off the heaviness in my chest. The place was too quiet, too perfect. Every tick of the clock echoed like a heartbeat in an empty room. Then I noticed a hallway I hadn't seen before, narrower, dimly lit. At the end of it, a door stood slightly open. Curiosity tugged at me. I shouldn't have, but I pushed it open. Inside was a study, smaller than the others, filled with shadows. But what caught my breath were the photographs on the wall. Dozens of them, all of the same man. Adrian. He looked like me, but not quite. His hair was lighter, his smile freer. There was warmth in his eyes I wasn't sure Leon had ever seen in me. I turned toward the desk and froze. Leon was standing in the doorway, watching me. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a sharp edge. "You shouldn't be in here." I didn't mean to." He stepped closer, the air between us tightening. "This room is private." "I just wanted to understand," I said quietly. "Who he was to you." His jaw clenched. "He was everything." The words cut deeper than I expected. Leon's gaze softened then, just slightly. "You should go to bed, Evan." I nodded, but as I passed him, his hand brushed mine. An accident, maybe. Or maybe not. It sent a shiver through me. Because for a heartbeat, I could have sworn his fingers lingered. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My heart wouldn't slow down. My mind wouldn't quiet. What started as a job was already becoming something else. Something dangerous. Leon Ashford wasn't just a man with secrets. He was a man whose grief had claws. And I was starting to realize that pretending to love him might be the one lie I couldn't control. Because somewhere deep down, a small, traitorous part of me already did. The rain came down like shattered glass that night. Cold, sharp, endless. I stood by the tall glass windows of Leon's mansion, watching the storm swallow the city lights below. The reflection staring back at me looked pale and lost. A man wearing expensive clothes that didn't belong to him, in a world that wasn't his. The silence inside the mansion was suffocating. Even the clock on the wall ticked softly, as if afraid to break it. Leon hadn't come home yet, and I couldn't decide whether to be relieved or terrified of what would happen when he did. Because tonight, everything felt like it was about to break. When I first started pretending to be his, I told myself I could handle it, that I was strong enough to draw a line between acting and feeling. But lines blur when he looks at you like you're the only thing keeping him breathing. When his fingers linger just a second too long on your wrist. When his voice softens and he calls you Evan instead of Adrian. And now, I didn't know which of us was more trapped, him in his past, or me in the ghost he made me wear. It was almost midnight when the door finally opened. Leon stepped in, his white shirt soaked, his hair dripping rain. He looked tired, no, haunted. The kind of exhaustion that sits deep in the bones, born from too many memories you can't outrun. He didn't even notice me at first. He just stood there in the dark, breathing heavily, staring at nothing. "Leon," I said quietly. His eyes lifted to meet mine, cold steel, tinted with something unreadable. "Why are you still awake?" he asked, his tone calm but distant. I couldn't sleep. My voice trembled more than I wanted it to. "You've been coming home later and later. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Okay." He tossed his keys on the counter. "I haven't been okay for a long time, Evan. You should know that by now." Something in me cracked. "Then why keep pretending that you are? Why keep pretending that I'm?" My throat tightened before I could finish. He turned toward me slowly. "That you're what?" "That I'm him." The words fell between us like lightning. Sharp, blinding, irreversible. Leon froze. His jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he would deny it, say I was imagining things. But instead he whispered, "Adrian." Not to me, to the ghost standing between us. I felt my breath leave me. "You just proved it." Leon's expression twisted. Pain, anger, confusion all at once. "Evan, listen." "No," I snapped. "You listen. You hired me because I looked like him, didn't you? Because I reminded you of what you lost. Stop." His voice was low, warning. But I couldn't stop. The words poured out like years of bottled-up tears. Was any of this real? The dinners, the walks, the way you looked at me? Or was I just another replacement for a man who's never coming back? Leon slammed his hand against the wall, the sound echoing through the marble halls. "You think I wanted this?" he shouted. "I didn't want to feel anything again. I didn't want to see your face every morning and forget where I was for half a second. I didn't want to look at you and remember the way he smiled." His voice broke. He pressed a hand over his eyes, breathing raggedly. "I didn't want to fall for someone I was supposed to keep at a distance." My chest ached. "Then why did you?" His hand fell to his side, and he looked at me, really looked at me. "Because you made it impossible not to." For a moment, everything went still. The rain softened to a whisper against the glass. And then I asked quietly, "Did you ever love me?" Leon's silence was louder than thunder. He didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't answer. And that silence was the only answer I needed. I turned away before he could see the tears burning down my cheeks. "You could have told me the truth from the start," I said softly. "I would have understood. But you made me believe this was real. You made me feel something I shouldn't have." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Evan, please." "No," I shook my head, trembling. "You didn't hire me to love me. You hired me to pretend that someone you lost could still exist." The sound that came from him wasn't anger. It was agony. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it, Leon?" I shouted. "Because I can't keep living in a dead man's shadow." The room felt smaller, the walls tighter. For a moment, I thought he might collapse. His hands were shaking. His voice was hoarse. "Adrian died because of me," he whispered. "I was driving that night. I lost control. He didn't make it." The confession shattered the last pieces of my heart. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream. But all I felt was sorrow, deep, raw sorrow for a man drowning in guilt. "You've been punishing yourself ever since," I said quietly. He nodded weakly. "And when I saw you, it felt like a second chance." Tears blurred my vision. I was never supposed to be a second chance, Leon. The storm outside grew louder again, matching the chaos inside us. I walked to the door, my hands trembling as I grabbed my coat. He moved toward me, desperate. "Don't go." Not like this. I turned back one last time. His eyes were red, his voice breaking, and for the first time, he looked human. Not the cold, powerful CEO everyone feared. Just a man begging not to be left alone again. But it was too late. I need to find myself again, I said, before I forget who I am completely. And with that, I stepped out into the rain. The storm swallowed me whole. The air was cold, my clothes clinging to my skin, but I didn't care. I walked until the mansion was a blur behind me, until my tears were lost in the rain. That night, I didn't sleep. I painted instead, my hands shaking as colors bled into each other across the canvas. When I finished, I stepped back and stared at it. It was Leon, not as the CEO everyone knew, but as the broken man I had seen tonight. His eyes hollow, his face soft, almost pleading. I titled it, The Man Who Forgot How to Feel. And as I stood there, brush still dripping, I whispered to myself, maybe one day, he'll learn again. It's strange how silence changes when you're finally free. The first week after I left Leon's mansion, the silence was unbearable. Heavy, echoing, filled with the ghost of his voice and the sound of rain against glass. I thought freedom would feel like peace. Instead, it felt like falling into a void where even my heartbeat sounded foreign. But slowly, the silence softened. It became mine again. The small apartment I rented above an old cafe smelled of coffee and paint. My brushes were scattered across the floor, half-finished canvases stacked by the window. It wasn't luxury, not even close, but it was real. It was mine. I spent weeks painting. Faces I remembered. Colors I'd felt. Emotions I hadn't been allowed to speak. Leon appeared in my art again and again, even when I tried to forget him. Not the cold CEO who hid behind designer suits, but the man who stood drenched in rain, whispering apologies to a ghost. One evening, as the sunset poured gold over the city, I stood back to look at my latest work. It was a reflection of the night I left. Two figures under the storm, one walking away while the other reached out into the rain. The painting was called Almost, because that's what we were. Almost real. Almost right. Almost enough. 2 months passed before something unexpected happened. A man from an art gallery reached out. He'd seen my work online. One of my pieces had gone viral after a popular art critic reposted it with the caption, "You can feel his heart break through the brushstrokes." The gallery offered me a solo exhibition. Me, the boy who once couldn't afford rent, now being invited to display his pain under white lights and champagne. I almost said no. But then I thought about the night I left Leon, about how I promised myself I'd stop being someone else's shadow. So I said yes. The night of the exhibition arrived. I wore a simple black shirt and grey jacket, nothing fancy. I didn't want to impress anyone. I just wanted to breathe. People moved around the room, murmuring softly. I heard words like raw, emotional, haunting. Some stood in front of the piece titled, The Man Who Forgot How to Feel. The painting I made the night I left Leon, and whispered things like, "You can almost see the pain in his eyes." I stood at a distance, a glass of water in hand, trying to stay invisible, until the air shifted. It was subtle, like the room suddenly remembered how to breathe. I didn't have to turn around to know who had just walked in. My pulse gave him away before my eyes did. Leon. He looked different. Not in the obvious ways. The same tall frame, sharp jaw, eyes that could slice through a room. But something in his expression had changed. The hardness was gone. His gaze wasn't heavy anymore. It was quiet. Human. He walked slowly through the gallery, his hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the paintings. When he stopped in front of The Man Who Forgot How to Feel, the world seemed to stop breathing. He just stood there, staring. I didn't move. My throat tightened as I watched him from across the room. I expected him to look angry. Or ashamed. But instead, his eyes softened with something I hadn't seen before, peace. After what felt like forever, he turned. And our eyes met. Everything, the gallery noise, the whispers, the lights, faded into a blur. He walked toward me, his steps slow but certain. "Evan," he said, his voice lower, steadier than I remembered. "Leon," I managed to whisper. He smiled faintly. "You look different." "So do you," I replied. Less haunted. A small laugh escaped him. Not mocking, not bitter. Just soft. "I've been trying to learn how to live again," he said. "Without ghosts." His gaze shifted to my paintings. "You did it, didn't you? You turned pain into beauty." I swallowed hard. I had to. It was the only way I could breathe again. He nodded. "I saw this one online." His eyes flicked toward the painting of him. "At first, I thought it was cruel of you, to show me like that. Broken. Lost. But then I realized it was the truth I refused to face. I looked at him, really looked. The dark circles under his eyes were lighter now. The lines of grief softened. You got help, I said quietly. He nodded. Therapy. And time. I sold the mansion too. It didn't feel like home anymore, just a shrine. I blinked, surprised. You sold it? Yes. He smiled faintly. I thought maybe one day I could build something new. From scratch. With the right person. The way he said it made my chest tighten. Leon. I know I hurt you, he said, his voice steady but raw. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know something, Evan. You weren't just a substitute. You were the reason I stopped wanting to live in the past. I wanted to speak, but the words caught in my throat. He took a hesitant step closer. That night you left, I thought I'd lost you for good. But watching you now, seeing how you've become, I realized maybe love isn't about holding on. Maybe it's about letting go and hoping the right one comes back when the time's right. My eyes burned. I tried to look away, but he gently touched my arm. The same hand that once gripped too tightly, now trembling slightly, as if asking permission. I didn't pull away. Evan, he said softly, I don't want to make excuses, but I do want to make things right. If you'll let me. Why now? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. After everything? He smiled sadly. Because this time, I see you. Not the shadow. Not the resemblance. Just you. For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight in my chest lift. I could see it now, the difference between then and now. Back then, his love was tangled in guilt and grief. But this version of Leon, he'd learned to let go. And I'd learned to live without him. Maybe that's why it didn't hurt to look at him anymore. Maybe that's why it felt peaceful. The gallery lights dimmed slightly, signaling the end of the show. People began to leave, but Leon stayed. He looked around once more, then turned back to me. You've made something beautiful out of pain, Evan. Don't let anyone, not even me, take that away from you. I smiled faintly. I won't. He hesitated before asking. Would it be too much if I called you tomorrow? No contracts, no pretending. Just a conversation. For a moment, I said nothing. Then I nodded. You can call. His smile was small but real. Then maybe this time, we can start over. As ourselves. When he left the gallery, I watched through the window as his car disappeared into the city lights. The rain had started again, gentle, cleansing, not the storm it used to be. And for the first time in years, I felt calm. Maybe forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. Maybe it meant learning how to remember without bleeding. I turned back to my painting, the one of him. I reached for my brush, dipped it in gold paint, and added a faint glow to the eyes. Not sorrow this time, warmth. Hope. Then I whispered to myself. Maybe the man who forgot how to feel finally learned how. It's funny how love finds its way back when you stop chasing it. 2 months passed after the gallery's Allery night. Leon did call me, just like he said he would. Not immediately, not desperately, but gently. One quiet afternoon, when sunlight filtered through my studio window and paint still stained my hands, my phone buzzed. Hey, he'd said, his voice low, uncertain. It's me. And I remember smiling without meaning to. Since then we talked, slowly, carefully, like two people learning a new language after years of silence. Sometimes it was about art, sometimes business, sometimes just life. No pretending. No ghosts. For the first time, Leon sounded like a man learning how to live. A few weeks later, he invited me to his new home. Not a mansion this time. Just a quiet house near the outskirts of the city, surrounded by green hills and morning mist. He said he wanted peace, not marble floors or bodyguards. I hesitated before going, afraid of reopening wounds that had barely healed. But something in his voice made me say yes. When I arrived, he met me at the door wearing a plain grey sweater, his hair slightly messy. No polished CO mask. Just Leon. Welcome, he said softly, stepping aside. The house smelled of coffee and pine. Paintings hung on the walls. Not mine, but other artists' works, full of colour and emotion. The air felt alive. He guided me to the backyard, where a small garden stretched behind the house. Roses, lilies, a few wildflowers scattered among them. In the centre stood an easel, mine. The same one I'd left behind months ago. You kept it? I asked, stunned. He nodded. You forgot it the night you left. I couldn't throw it away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The breeze carried the scent of wet soil, and something new, something almost like hope. We sat outside, mugs of coffee warming our hands. He broke the silence first. I don't expect forgiveness, Evan. But I need you to know. I've changed. Not because of guilt. Because I wanted to become someone who deserved what you gave me. Honesty, warmth, a second chance at being human. I looked at him. The same man who once couldn't say my name without trembling. Now, he met my gaze without fear. I forgave you, I said quietly. A long time ago. I just didn't realize it until now. His shoulders eased, the tension melting from his face. You once said I hired you to pretend someone I lost could still exist. His voice softened. You were right. But what you didn't know was that somewhere along the way, you made me feel something I thought I'd buried with him. He turned to me. You made me feel alive again. The truth in his tone hit me harder than any confession before. No grand gestures, no rehearsed apologies, just truth. And for the first time, I let myself smile. Then maybe it wasn't all pretend, I said. No, he whispered. It never was. He reached out, hesitating before his fingers brushed mine. Gentle, asking, not demanding. I didn't pull away. From that moment, we didn't rush anything. We built something new, not from the ashes of what we'd been, but from the pieces we chose to keep. Days turned into weeks. I started painting in his garden every morning. He'd bring me coffee, sometimes sit nearby with his laptop, sometimes just watch quietly as sunlight danced across the canvas. At night, we cooked together, awkwardly at first, burning half the meals but laughing harder than either of us had in years. It was ordinary, and somehow, that made it extraordinary. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, I was working on a new piece, a portrait of the garden itself. Leon stood beside me, arms folded, studying my brushstrokes. You still paint like you're telling a secret, he murmured. Maybe I am. He smiled, stepping closer. What secret is this one hiding? I tilted my head, pretending to think. That the man watching is still learning how to smile. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes from the chest, unguarded. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small, folded piece of paper. I've been carrying this for a while, he said, handing it to me. It was the old contract. The one I'd signed months ago. The one that started everything. My chest tightened as I unfolded it, half expecting old pain to sting again. But across the printed words, written in Leon's neat handwriting, were 5 simple lines. No roles. No conditions. No pretending. Just us. If you'll have me, this time for real. My eyes blurred. I looked up at him, and he smiled. That rare, soft smile that used to appear only in glimpses. I wanted to rewrite the contract, he said. Because this time, you're not a substitute. You're the only choice I ever want to make. Tears threatened to fall, but I laughed instead, shaky, half in disbelief. You're impossible, you know that? Maybe, he said, stepping closer until his breath brushed my skin. But you make impossible things feel worth trying. Before I could respond, he leaned in, slowly, carefully, and kissed me. It wasn't like the first time, full of confusion and heat. It was gentle, deliberate, like a promise sealed in sunlight. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing in someone else's story. I was standing in ours. Weeks turned into months. The world kept moving, but we built our little rhythm. Coffee in the morning, painting by noon, laughter in the evening. Sometimes, Leon would help in the garden, dirt on his hands, sunlight catching the curve of his jaw. Sometimes, I'd catch him watching me with that quiet wonder, as if he still couldn't believe I stayed. And one day, when I showed him my latest painting, a portrait of the two of us under the same storm that once tore us apart, he smiled and said, "You've captured it perfectly." What? I asked. The moment love stopped being punishment and became peace. That night, we stood on the balcony, the city lights glowing far away. Leon wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. You know, he murmured, when I first met you, I thought I was buying time. But instead, you gave me forever. I turned, smiling through the tears I didn't bother to hide. That's funny, I whispered, because I thought I was just pretending and ended up finding home. He kissed my forehead. So no more pretending? I shook my head. Never again. The stars shimmered above us, the air warm, the world quiet. And as his hand found mine, I realized something simple but true. Love doesn't always arrive perfect. Sometimes it arrives broken, trembling, and late. But when it's real, it doesn't replace what was lost. It heals what remains. He hired me as a substitute. But in the end, he made me his forever.